Dublin's FM104. It is the Strawberry Alarm Clock, and we can now link up with our good friend Bressie. He's a musician. He is a podcaster. Trust him. Yes, we do. He's not a doctor.
You have a doctorate.
He has the. Are you a doctor? Technically a doctor?
No, I got a fellowship. I didn't get the doctorate.
Oh, trust him. He's got a fellowship.
Doesn't have the same ring to it. Too many syllables.
So you're here with us to talk to about. I mean, you're, as you say yourself, you're not. Nobody's overqualified in these things, but you have a keen interest in all things mental health and looking after yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I went through a pretty interesting 15-year journey with my own mental health, and that kind of led me back into studying it as much as I could and understanding the cultural aspects of it, and then, you know, from the kind of mindfulness aspects of it, what you can actually do rather than constantly look at what I couldn't do. I started to look at what I could, and that's what led me back into studying and setting up Lust for Life, because I've always been solution focused with this stuff. I'm not problem admiration society. There's problems there. We know there's problems in the system. We know there's problems in societal stigmas. We know all this stuff, but either we keep saying it or we actually figure out ways to tackle it. And that's what I was hoping to do with Lust for Life when we set it up. And now we're in 300 primary schools. We will be in every primary school by 2023. And that was what I set out to do at the start, was use our incredible education system to teach young people how to navigate this stuff.
What do you wish, if you had a little snippet of what you're hoping to spread around schools, what do you wish you had in primary school?
I think the first thing young people need is the language to describe this stuff. When I was young, when we were young lads, like all of us, we're all kind of the same age. And we were always told not to be sad, not to be scared, not to be anxious when you were children. These are core emotions. You should feel those things, and you should explore them and talk about them. You can't push them away. You can't outrun them. And then as we get older, we get really confused with these emotions. We're like, oh, I feel sad, but I shouldn't feel sad, because everyone should feel happy and do cartwheels up the meadow every day. Sadness and suffering, as tough as it is part of life. It's just part of the journey. And I think young kids should be told that early on. And I think not that you're going to walk into primary schools and go, hey kids, suffering is part of life. You know, yeah, there's ways of doing this, and there's evidence-based programs. And what we did is we started working with UCD School of Psychology to develop research-based. So we do this program, but then we have the evidence to back it up. I think that's always really, really important. And it's a tougher journey to go on. But with young kids, it's language, so they can describe and talk to their parents how they're feeling. But then there's young kids out there who don't have that support at home either. So there's all these different aspects that we looked at. Also, teachers need to understand that, you know, they have enough to do. You know, what we wanted to develop is the programs, the solutions where teachers aren't taking on anymore. And, you know, everyone can say, well, teachers get holiday. Teachers have one of the most difficult jobs in this society, and they should be celebrated as such. Healthcare professionals and teachers are the two most important groups, I feel, in our society. And we just want to help them. We want to make sure that this works for them as much as it works for the kids.
And for people listening now this morning, like for younger people listening, you know, you're very successful, you're a rock star. What, you know, and you've branched out into all these other things, and you've got a podcast and touring the podcast and everything. If they were feeling anxious out this morning, what little piece of advice would you give to people to try and combat those feelings?
I think the most important thing is to express them, is to find a way to express them. These are normal human reactions. Anxiety, as uncomfortable as it is something that we need to stay alive. It keeps us alive. It keeps us on our toes, gets us out of bed in the morning. It prepares us for things. It's a really brilliant trait that we have. And sometimes it gets a little bit out of control and uncomfortable and difficult. It did for me for many years. But the most difficult part for me, guys, was I didn't know how to express it. I always talk about this. When I first experienced panic disorder, I was 13 years of age. I came back from Israel, where I lived with my parents for, you know, there was complete peace in the Middle East for 15 years until the day the President landed in Tel Aviv, and the 9-day war started. So I was completely overwhelmed by this, and I came home and I started experiencing this panic disorder. And I didn't know what it was. I thought I had asthma, all this kind of stuff. And then I'll never forget to the day I died, when Kurt Cobain died, who was my hero, and many kids, my heroes at my age. And I asked the teacher at the time, Christian Brother, what happened, and he punched my desk and called him a coward. And I always thought to myself, that was my mental health education. How could I have been any other way, you know? And I don't want kids to have to go through that again. And that is why we do that work with Lust for Life. But what I will say to kids is, this is uncomfortable. It isn't nice, but it is normal, and it's a human response that keeps us connected. What you got to find is a way to deal with it. And everybody has their own subjective ways of dealing with anxiety. Some people like going for a walk. Some people like meditating. Some people hate meditating. Some people, need a bit more support, maybe need therapy. Maybe there's other things there that have happened in their life that have been traumatizing. And that doesn't have to be the big stuff. It could be simple. It could be a teacher that said the wrong thing to you. It's all that stuff. Human psychology is, I always say, it's really complex, but human needs aren't. We need to feel connected, we need to feel loved, and we need to feel safe. And if we can look at how we do that, and then you look at things like I had the Ombudsman for Children on the podcast this week, Dr. Niall Muldoon, and one incredible gentleman, and telling me how many kids are homeless in this country. How are they ever going to feel safe? How are they ever going to feel connected? They're in trouble from day one. And that's why these things are so important. If you don't have foundations for children, it becomes very difficult for them to grow up. Not, some kids do great and are fine, but some don't. And we can't let any kid behind. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do here. And without going into that political, this isn't about politics or being left or right or whatever. This is about people. And I just don't believe a country with the economic strength of Ireland should ever have homelessness with children. And I think the one thing I always say to people, from somebody, my background, academic background, was actually economics. I understand it. I'm not an idealistic guy and just says, listen, we should all just live off nothing. But the reality is economics is a really blunt instrument to judge a society. If you want to really judge a society, look at how we treat our most vulnerable people. And we're not doing a good enough job here. And you can't spin that. It's just the facts are there. So that's the way we do this work. Mental health. The most important thing I've ever been taught with my mentor, Dr. Paul Dalton, said, equality is the best form of therapy. If you can drive for a more equal society with less discrimination, with less power imbalances, we can start to see people, who might have grown up in otherwise difficult homes or whatever that might be, are not access to the right supports. We can change that. And that is within our capacity as a country.
I think what you say there, whatever that might be, and that's so important today with what we're doing with Jigsaw. It doesn't, like what I asked one of the counsellors, is there any common theme? And he said, no, everyone's journey is different. Everyone has different reasons why they'll need to talk to somebody. So
it totally is. And my partner actually, and actually the guy I work with most on the podcast, Dr. Tony Bates, is a founding member of Jigsaw, Headstrong, as it was known as first. Yeah. And he says that. He goes like, Niall, this isn't about, everyone's journey is different. We all respond differently to different things. There is trauma can often complicate things, no doubt about it. But the difficulty I had growing up, and when I started to do a bit of homework on my own head and going to therapy, I had this quite abusive primary school. A lot of us might remember the 80s and 90s where, there were still issues in primary schools where teachers were still hitting kids. And I remember in my school, it was very prevalent, and going into school every day and not feeling safe, every single day going in. And it wasn't just me, it was all of us, which was probably easier. But I remember saying to my therapist, he goes, course that impacts you, because once again, the basic need of any child is to feel safe. Safety, safety, safety. A child should be able to feel safe. And that is what we have to, and the thing in Ireland is we've made huge progress there. You look at our education system, and what was quite emotional for me was when I was doing this work with the schools, to see the care teachers take now over their students, to see the unbelievable empathy and compassion teachers have towards their students compared to what we had. That's going to have such huge impact in this generation. And we always talk about this generation are going to have more problems. I don't know if they are. I just don't know, because they're surrounded by more support. We have the language. They're able to express themselves now. There's programs in schools. Yes, there's more things to contend with, more issues, social media, all that kind of stuff. But young people are now knowing that this is a conversation that they can have. We didn't know that. And that's what, for me personally, did an awful lot of the damage.
How are you now, Bressie?
I'm great. I'm like, this is the thing, because the pandemic is, I almost don't believe in labeling myself as, whatever I went through. I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder at 22 years of age or 25 years of age. And I kind of think, did I even need that label? I didn't know if I did, but the pandemic, everybody knocked me for dead. And then I went through this process of kind of going, and this is what happens when you've done years of training and years of therapy. It doesn't make it any easier, but you start to rationalize it. You start to go, this is a perfectly normal response to a pandemic. You can't see your loved ones. You can't, integrate with community and society. You can't do the things you love to do. You can't go, and have a release and go for a holiday. Yet, in our case, for example, or even our industry, we had financial concerns, all that other stuff. And it all came in like a perfect storm. I moved home, lived with my parents, who I was terrified for, cocooned them for 16 months. And I said to myself, of course, this doesn't feel good. This is not nice. This is horrible. But the one thing I've taken from it is that I don't see this as a lost year. I see it as a year that we've all really, really gained huge levels of strength. I don't like the word resilience, because that either means you have it or you don't. I just think this lived experience that we've all gone through, and no matter how tough it was, in the words of Elton John, we're still standing. Maybe we're a little tougher than we think we are. Maybe we are a little bit, we all have that inner dog in us that we had to bring out over the last 12 months. I did. We all did. But we still did it. It didn't mean it was nice. It did not mean it was easy, but we did it. And I think that's what the message I want to get out to people, rather than going, it's all going to be a mess. I'm like, well, maybe we all should recognize how strong we were. That sometimes we say things like strength, people perceive that it shouldn't have been hard. That's not what strength is. Strength is when things are really, really hard, and you're able to carry it through, and you're able to deal with it, and you're still able to kind of function. Because there was moments throughout that pandemic where just getting out of bed was a thing you had to do, and that was it. And some people had to work really hard. Some didn't have any work at all. We all had different journeys.
And if anything from the last 18 months or beyond has left you feeling that you still need a bit of help, I think that's so important today. And whether you're that person who needs it or you're in a good place, maybe you were lucky the last 12 months plus, and you want to help today, you can go to f104.ie/donate, because all of Jigsaw services are free, and the donations will help their services continue and actually grow. Because that's what you're talking about, schools. What they want to do is get into more areas around Dublin.
Yeah. And can I just say, Mark, on that, like I, as somebody who co-founded a charity and understands the work you have to do for it, Jigsaw, I don't know where we'd be without them. I mean that truthfully. I always say it's not our jobs to be picking up the pieces of a dysfunctional system, or the fact that government haven't prioritized mental health enough. Without the likes of Jigsaws and the other charities that have just done work that I don't think anyone will fully realize. And that's the big thing for Jigsaw. I would love to see Jigsaw have the funding to be able to go to everywhere across the country, every community they can get into, because their model of how they work and how they treat and how they support is the type of model I think that should be integrated into our health system itself. And that's an important thing to say about Jigsaw. We need them in more communities. I know this is a Dublin station, and I'd love to see them on every community across Dublin, because they do in unbelievable work that it's kind of hard to fully explain to people until you see it in action.
Well, Bressie, after the year and a half that you've had, we just wish you all the best, and we hope to see you rocking out with the Blizzards, rocking out with all your music and touring your podcasts and making up for all those gigs that you haven't had, unfortunately. Haven't had. We hope that all happens for you soon. We will. We'll make up for it, lads. Thanks so much for your time.
Remind everyone, Bressie, if people have been inspired by some of what you've been saying, I always find it's always interesting to chat to you. Where can people get your podcast? What's the name of it?
I have two podcasts. One is called Where's My Mind? It's a weekly podcast, and I have a double daily podcast, Wake Up, Wind Down on Spotify, for those of you who want to explore meditation and mindfulness without the overwhelm and without the confusion. It's simple. Let's not complicate this stuff. We need a little bit of space in our day. That's all it is. And that's all I'm trying to achieve with it.